Welcome to this episode of the Cosmic Light Body Podcast. Before we begin today, I would like to remind you to visit my website at soulintegrationcoach.com. There you will find information on spiritual coaching sessions, energy healing sessions, links to my YouTube channel, this podcast, my Instagram account, and private Facebook group. For today's episode, I am pleased to announce a very special guest, professional psychic and medical intuitive Julie Ryan. Julie is the host of the weekly podcast entitled Ask Julie Ryan, which has received over 5 million downloads to date. Julie's podcast offers a forum for listeners to call in and discuss medical issues where Julie can offer up intuitive medical guidance. It's really an amazing podcast. I've listened to a few episodes and I highly recommend that you go over to Julie's website, askjulieryan.com, sign up for her mailing list, and receive notifications for upcoming episodes. In this episode, we are going to be discussing some very cool topics such as the process of dying, which Julie terms as the 12 phases of transition, communicating with deceased loved ones, communicating with spirit guides, and a whole bunch of other multidimensional goodness. So get comfortable, get excited, and be sure you stay till the end. I'm here with Julie Ryan, and I really appreciate you coming and joining me on my Cosmic Light Body podcast. And I've been reading through your book. I'm almost done with the book, not completely finished, but it's been really fascinating. To me, I just am amazed by the information that you have in there. The experiences that you've had are very similar to a lot of the things that I've experienced. And the book is entitled Angelic Attendants: What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. And it's just blowing my mind. How did you come about your abilities, your gifts? I know that you've said that you have learned to be a medical intuitive and a psychic. How did you come about to be guided into that space?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. What a treat to get this time to chat with you. I'm delighted. And how I learned how to be a medical intuitive is I have a friend who, going on close to 30 years ago now, Mark, gave me a book as a birthday present called called Anatomy of the Spirit from Carolyn Mace. That was the first one.
Okay.
And she called herself a medical intuitive, and I thought, what the heck is that? I had never heard that term before. And I read her book, and I wanted to know more. And I am an inventor of surgical devices that are sold throughout the world, and an entrepreneur. I've founded a bunch of different companies in different industries. And so I was always interested in the medical side of the equation from the supply side. And I read Carolyn Mace's book, and then I wanted to know more. And back then, Mark, we didn't have the internet. And we certainly didn't have Amazon yet. Amazon hadn't been dreamt up yet by Bezos. And I went to a bookstore. I did the old-fashioned thing, and I went to a bookstore, Barnes & Noble. And I thought about going to the library, but I thought they probably have more woo-woo stuff in the bookstore than in the library. And I found this book called Hands of Light by Brennan, who is a former NASA physicist who has parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable language for the non-scientific mind. That would be me. And I read her book, and she talks about how to use energy fields to help facilitate healing. And so after reading her book, I wanted to know more, and I called her school to find out if perhaps they had a graduate in my area that was teaching, and sure enough, they did. And I studied with this woman for 6 years, and I'm still in touch with her after all of these years. She's she's 80, pushing 80 now, and just terrific. And then over the years, I have parlayed what I learned from her and my own techniques and my own experiences. I have literally worked with tens of thousands of people from all over the world, and I've streamlined things. And now I teach a class to people all over the world that's online, and it's real. It's real time. It's not a Zoom video. We're in a video conference room. We're learning lots about that these days.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, and it's really been just so much fun to get to work with people from all over and to help facilitate their healings, and I say that I help people by helping them to answer unanswerable questions by utilizing spirit and energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I had an experience years ago when I was young. My aunt had spirit in her house, actually, and I'd always been open to that, even before I awakened, very intuitive with things like that, very interested in the subject. And she gave me a couple of books. One was A World Beyond by Ruth Montgomery, and The Here and Hereafter. And I read these books, and I was just very fascinated by them, and they really resonated with me. And after I awakened, my aunt, who had passed, was one of the first to come into my awareness and just continue those conversations. It was just really incredible how it all tied together. I know in your book you talked about that, how things happen, and down the road you'll find how things just tie together. The dots get connected. It may not make sense at the time,
right?
But it just all from the quantum field, we know it all happens. It's all happening now. We just may, on a linear space-time, things seem to be spread out, and it was just amazing how these things come back years later and drop in, and they just make sense.
Well, it's all part of our experience, and everything always unfolds perfectly, even if it's something that we think is not optimal. And we may know who wants to be in the middle of a pandemic when the country and most of the world, if not all of the world, is shut down and la, 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 but it's all unfolding perfectly, and it's benefiting us in ways that we'll be able to realize eventually. It's hard for us to wrap our human minds around stuff that we see as detrimental or horrific even. But to your point about reading that book before when you were a kid, we all come in with this ability. Everybody has this ability, and we all have the ability to turn it on and enhance it. Most of us as children are able to do it effortlessly. All of us are. And then we have adults, our parents, perhaps teachers that say, oh, it's just your imagination. That's not really real. And then we discount it and we ignore it. And then a lot of times there's some catalyst that will lead us to want to explore it, because we'll get some thought and then it'll happen, or there'll be some seemingly serendipitous event and we'll say, okay, that's just too weird.
Right. It can't be attributed to chance. Absolutely. And I've had those types of things all my life. But a couple of years ago, I had an experience where I lost my dog, first of all, 10 years old, my Doberman, and my cousin passed away around that same time. I had an experience where I was just listening to my music, which tends to get me into that frequency. And I popped out of my body. I had an awakening moment where I popped out of my body, and I was in, the best way to describe it was just the cosmos. And I was flooded with all this information about the universe, about life, even physics, gravity, that kind of thing just started to just filter through me. And after that, my guides started to appear. It was just an incredible experience, and it's almost, you wake up to that piece of you that you've known was always there. You just weren't really aware of it because of society and beliefs and norms and that kind of thing. And it just blows everything wide open.
Well, you tapped into what's known as consciousness. I know that sounds like a hippy-dippy kind of a term.
Oh, no.
But it's consciousness and its universal intelligence. And that's the thing that's so cool, is when, this is what I teach in my class, it's when we know how to access that universal intelligence and communicate with spirit, and spirit and universal intelligence is all the same thing. Every spirit has its own frequency, every thought has a frequency. And when I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world with a communications degree. I mean, how does that work? Well, I tapped into universal intelligence, and this was before I knew how to do woo-woo. But I had a thought all thoughts have a frequency. They don't originate in our heads. I was on this thought frequency, like turning to a radio station.
Right.
And I was getting information coming in about what these inventions needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, you were talking about getting the physics information and even information about gravity. And the cool thing about this is I tell people I can teach someone to read, and they can access anything, any information they want that's in their written word. Likewise, I can teach someone how to access spirit and universal intelligence, and again, they have access to anything that's ever been thought, anything that's getting ready to be thought or hasn't been thought yet. It's all the same.
Mm-hmm. You know, yeah, and it's interesting because around that time in my life, I was interested very much so in the Akashic records.
Mm-hmm.
And after the awakening, I had this experience where I had this a guided meditation came to me about accessing the Akashic records, and through that meditation came my spirit guides. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's just these synchronicities and these things in the way that this information comes to you and leads you into this space, this energetic field, this quantum field. To this day, I mean, it's still mind-blowing when these experiences happen. You know, you're comfortable with them, you know what's happening, but still just sometimes it's just wow. And I love to pass that energy on to people and help people with that and show them how they could do it as well.
Well, and it sounds like you will most likely agree with me on this. A lot of times, and a lot of the work that I do is medical intuitive work, Mark, where I'll get somebody, I say get them on my radar. I connect with them energetically, and it's like I'm a human MRI. I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, whatever. And then I watch energetic healings happen. And some of every day there's stuff that I get to see energetically that I just think, my goodness, if I can't make this stuff up. If I did, I'd be writing Harry Potter. I'd have a Harry Potter empire like J.K. Rowling and be worth $1 billion. It's
so funny.
So amazing.
I've said that many times. I said, you just can't make this stuff up.
Oh,
and then, you know, and then it gets validated, you know, and the way validations come are just like, whoa, mind-blowing. And I just sit back now and I just laugh. It just feels so good.
I tell people, you don't need to take LSD or ayahuasca. Just learn to do woo-woo, and you'll see all this wild stuff that there's no way you can envision. And to your point, when it gets validated, and back to what we were talking about a minute ago, how everybody has this ability when we come in, when we're born. We've all had situations where we think of somebody and then all of a sudden they call us, or we run into them, or they send us a text, or something comes up that they notify us, and we'll say, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about you. And we'll think, what a coincidence. No coincidences in life.
It's aligning with a frequency.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, and it's so nice to see that science is finally starting to embrace quantum physics. It's just been kind of the off-topic for years, and it seems like they're starting to embrace it now, which is fantastic.
Well, I just did a private consult with a client. I just got off the phone with her right before we started chatting, and she lives in Colorado, and she goes to a community college in Fort Collins, and they have an integrative medicine department that teaches energy medicine. And she said it's been so successful that they're building a whole building just for energy medicine. And I have another client that has taken many classes at the University of Minnesota. So it's very much coming into mainstream. Both of those places, they're teaching Reiki, energy healing, and other modalities of energy healing and all of that within the confines of a medical practitioner. And to your point, it's coming online. It's a paradigm shift. It's getting people to think about it in a different way. But I believe eventually the work I do as a medical intuitive and energy healer will be implemented into mainstream medicine, and there will be energy healers that will be in the regular doctor's offices. And I am rarely with somebody when I scan them and do a healing on them or have any kind of do any work with them. You know, I laugh, Mark. I say I'm a buffet of psychicness because we can scan you medically, we can scan your pets, we can do past life stuff, we can talk to your spirit guides, your dead grandma, I mean, whatever, your angel. It's just all connecting into consciousness. But I think it's amazing how we're starting to see it be implemented into some of the more mainstream academia and medical providers.
It is, and a lot of times we could hear in people talking that they're moving that direction. They may not be aware of it per se, but we're picking up clues there that there's the collective consciousness, let's say, is starting to move in that, you know, more in that direction. And the clues are out there. I see it every day, just in things that people are saying, the way they're referencing experiences and that kind of thing. May not be on the forefront of their mind as to where it's coming from, but we know where it's coming from, and that's really great to see.
I agree. Well, I've had several physicians take my class, many professors, scientists, and then housewives, construction workers, I mean, all walks of life, but it's been interesting with the physicians and the professors because professors in nursing school, I have an art professor in my class right now. I've had archaeologists, a gal who started the entrepreneur program at the University of Southern California took my class.
Oh, wow.
So then they're taking this information that they're learning of how to connect with spirit and access universal intelligence, and then they're benefiting their communities and their students and their family and friends and their clients in all these walks of life. I had one gal take my class. This is one of my favorite job descriptions of a student. She lives in Louisiana, and I live in Alabama. Can you tell? I'm saying it like the Southerners say it. She lives in Louisiana. Normally, I would say Louisiana.
There you go.
Used to hanging around all these Southerners with their lazy tongues. And she has an archery school, and she leads tours to Canada, and they go bear hunting with a bow and arrow. And she wanted these skill sets to be able to communicate with the bears, number one, and also to communicate to be sure that it's not a mama bear. I mean, she can tell what's a female and what's a male, but she said she's using that to help her communicate with the animals, which that was wild. Talk about making stuff up. I mean, you can't make that up. I want to be able to talk to bears because I lead tours on bear hunting expeditions with bow and arrow in Canada. Okay.
It is. Yeah, it's incredible. And it's the ability to really communicate, dial into anything. Everything is consciousness. So once you're tapped into that unified field, you're connected. You know, after my dog passed, he came to me, and I had been communicating with him and doing some work with him. He was actually doing some work with me, which was really fascinating. My son is also intuitive. Both my boys are intuitive, my wife as well. But my son actually saw him standing in our kitchen after he had passed. So they're around. They're always around. It's just, again, it's that awareness to be able to tap into that frequency and align with them and communicate with them. But it's incredible. It's just fascinating.
Well, and how wonderful that you guys as parents have encouraged your children to validate what they're seeing, because so often children shut down those abilities because their parents and their grandparents and their teachers say, "Oh, honey, you really don't have an imaginary friend. That's just something that you're pretending. It's not really real."
It out.
Yeah, and this child is saying, "But Mom, here's what he looks like, and here's what he's saying." And I have moms, especially more moms than dads. I've had a few dads over the years, but primarily moms who have told me amazing stories about their children, little children who can't read yet, and they know information about past lives. There's no way they could know, and they are able to corroborate that information online or with historical documents. And children who see deceased loved ones who've been dead 20 years before the child is born, and they know things about this deceased loved one's life that there's no way they could know. and then also children who are trying to get a grasp on, okay, grandma's body's in the casket, but you're telling me she's in heaven. I'm 3. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I was asked for the years to write a children's book, a children's picture book, so that parents could use that, and I did. It was released right before Christmas, and it's called Angel Messages for Kids. In the past 2 days, Mark, I've had 2 different moms email me and say, one told both about their 2-year-old, but one said that her 2-year-old little boy named Finn he wasn't sleeping through the night, and she got the book and they read it. She said he reads it every night, and she told him, honey, if you wake up in the middle of the night, just talk to your angels, and he's been sleeping through the night since.
Wow.
That's number one. And then the other one came from New York City, and this 2-year-old named Margot, and she said, Margot reads the book every night, and we do not leave the house without that book being in the diaper bag, and she wants to talk about the angels all the time.
Wow.
And so it's hitting a nerve even with these toddlers. You know, it's resonating with them. They know it's true. They know that it makes sense. And so the funny thing about that book, too, real fast, I was led by my spirit guide named Pope Clement VI, who you read about it in Angelic Attendants, to get it out before Christmas. And I thought, oh, okay, so people can buy it as a Christmas present. And I had to push it hard. I paid my illustrator double. It came out December 20th, so it was out before Christmas. But I had someone say to me just about 2 weeks ago, she said, well, now you know why Pope Clement was pushing that book being published before Christmas. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, because of the COVID. You know, think how much comfort that brings children. And we think children aren't paying attention to what's going on. I said, of course they are. They're hearing the news. They're hearing their parents and grown-ups talk about this. They're not in school. So I thought, to your point earlier, of everything unfolds perfectly and it's all part of the progression, even if we don't see it at the time.
Right. And a lot of it, presents,
right.
Lessons for us, too, to go through, as in your situation with having to go through the hoops to get this out in time. Is work for you that you're doing for yourself. And you just see how it blooms. It's like a flower that blooms. And it's right guidance. Where it's supposed to be. Exactly.
Yeah, following the guidance we get.
But, that book also, I would think, is helping the parents as well, because if they could tie back in to that child, the child within, that's going to open up more of that as well and bring comfort to them as they tie into those frequencies and start to remember the truth and get beyond that, like get under the stories of the conditioning. So when they share that energy with their children, and their children are more closely aligned with that, it comes in through the parents as well. It just helps everybody.
You're absolutely right. And it takes 2 minutes to read the book. It's a picture book. It's about the illustrations. I think the whole book has maybe 17 sentences, and none of them are long.
Right.
And I agree. It's bringing comfort, I believe, to parents as they read it with their children, especially during this time that we're going through right now.
And I think it helps to activate that piece of them that might be forgotten, that's been shut down because of social conditioning, religion, education, whatever it may be. I did a video on this on my YouTube channel when I talk about higher frequencies, higher dimensions per se versus where we are here in physical. And I liken it to a wheel, where I say that the third dimension, the physical dimension, really represents the rim of the wheel. And we're walking around the rim of the wheel, and in order to get from spoke to spoke, we have to travel along the rim. But as we activate and we tap into universal consciousness, what happens is we're able to travel up from the rim, up the spoke, to the hub of the wheel. And from the hub of the wheel, we have access to all the spokes. So we could actually tap in to our multidimensional self and have access to past lives, different times, our guides, that kind of thing. And I think children are just more naturally aligned with that. They haven't been here long enough in the physical.
Great analogy, yes. And I agree with the children that they haven't shut it down. They haven't shut down the abilities.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is just so fascinating. You learned to, so you we're intuitive, but how did you actually learn? How did you teach yourself to be a medical intuitive and a psychic?
Well, I studied with this woman, Susan Crumpton, for 6 years and spent the equivalent of getting a PhD or going to medical school. I spent tens of thousands of dollars doing that and learned about energy fields and learned about things like that. A lot of her training had to do with, she's a therapist too. She's a businesswoman who also is a therapist. She's a licensed therapist. So had a lot about transference, not transferring our own stuff onto the client and scanning with them. But since that time, I've streamlined what I learned, and I teach it in 4 weeks, 2 hours online in these classes. And it's 90%, Mark, and you alluded to it before, is tapping into the super high vibration of energy, and then you can take it wherever you want. I believe that our heads are like big satellite dishes, and we receive and we transmit frequencies. So whenever we get on a certain frequency of a thought or a spirit's frequency, and spirits it's been my experience that spirit has the same frequency whether it's attached to a body or not. Doesn't matter. And so how we tune our satellite dish heads to a certain frequency is with our thought. We think of something, and that tunes our heads to that. So a previous thought will lead to another thought, and it's like, wonder what happens when I pour vinegar on a weed out in the yard. Right. And that thought is, then you're on that channel with what happens when you pour vinegar on a weed in the yard. Can you tell I have weeds in my yard that I need to address? And so that thought process might be, I'm going to Google that and see what that is, or, I'm going to just take my bottle of vinegar and go out and test it. And for a weed in my garden, just pour it on there and see what happens. So you're bringing in thoughts of things, and then it leads to another thought, and leads to another thought, and leads to another thought, and then you take action on those thoughts. Yeah, because what I was getting at was, like if you used any what type of procedures and tools you use, but it's that makes complete sense because that's how I've experienced it. And a lot of times I've noticed that the guides will come in maybe in a more, let's call it a more dense form to get my attention. And once I connect, once I align with that frequency, I follow that frequency. And as I've grown, they haven't been coming in to that extent to get my attention because I'm open to just my thought, to just shifting my thought and aligning with them. So there's a process there I've noticed, with me at least, of, it's the process of entrainment. I'm sure you've heard of it, where we align with a frequency and they get my attention. And once I'm aligned, then it opens up that ability to communicate with them. It's like setting a preset on a radio station, right? You're scanning the station, and once you find the frequency, you hit the preset button. And it takes just a matter of a thought to get back in alignment with them. Exactly. And there are lots of different techniques that people are taught with different modalities. Okay, hold crystals. I laugh. I say stand on your left foot, raise your right hand in the air. I mean, whatever. Pendulums, sage burning. I mean, whatever. None of that is necessary. It's instant. Exactly what you talked about. It's instant. You turn on, I call it, let me turn on my radar, and it takes a nanosecond, and I am able to reach that frequency. And that's what I do in my classes, is I hold that super high level of vibration over 2 hours, over 4 Saturdays. So my students are familiar with it. They know what to access, because if you haven't been there, you don't know what it feels like. Right. And then they're able to turn their abilities on and off at will, like I do. I don't walk around scanning people. I think that's unethical. Right. Yeah, but you're holding the space when you're with your students, and you're giving them that ability to connect and to feel that. And that's so important. Your radar, it's funny because I was going to ask you about your radar, because in the book you talked about that I believe it was a home, or was it an office with the Indian chief? Yeah. Where you were told it was haunted, and you said you didn't have your radar up, and then you turned your radar on, so to speak, and then you were able to see the spirit.
of the Indian chief, which was just, it's just amazing.
Instantly. And then there's this whole other big scene in that chapter that ensues that's amazing. Yeah,
you realized it was his spirit guide. It was following him in other locations and that kind of thing. But I've noticed that too, because before you really get practiced and develop, the intuition gets strong and you realize you could just shift a thought, you'll be off doing something, you'll be in your mind, and then it's just a real quick, oh, hey, I'm going to connect. And it's just that simple of a thought shifts you right into alignment.
Right. I was in a fun story, real quick story. I was, for one of my businesses, I was lecturing in Austin, Texas to a group of CEOs, and someone had said to me, oh, you got to go to the Driscoll Hotel for lunch if you have time. It's this historic hotel. I'm fine. So I did. I went, and it's beautiful, and I'm in the restaurant, and I'm reading about the history of the hotel. And Colonel Driscoll was a guy who made his fortune off of selling cattle to the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Fine. There's this big painting of Colonel Driscoll in the lobby when you walk in. And I'm reading about how they had visiting psychics that would come to their spa. I thought, cool. So after lunch, I went to the concierge mark and I said, do you have somebody that can give me a tour? And she said, yeah. And so this person's giving me a tour, and I saw all this psychic stuff, which is another story. But I smelled cigar smoke outside of one of the ballrooms.
Okay.
And I thought, there is no way that this hotel is going to be letting somebody smoke inside, let alone somebody smoke cigars. And I thought, I'll bet that's Colonel Driscoll. And I turned on my radar real fast. I raised my vibrational level. It takes a nanosecond, a fraction of a second. And there he was, strolling through the kind of the vestibule outside of all the ballrooms, looking like he just did, and looking like he did at his painting. It was wild. And then I saw some other stuff. Yeah. And that experience, interestingly enough, serendipity, no coincidences in life. The next day, I met a woman in the parking lot when I was walking into a building, and mentioned something about the weather. Long story short, she was a publisher. There was a book that had just gone to press on the Driscoll Hotel. I said, oh, I was there. It was amazing. She said, well, it's haunted. I said, yeah, I saw this stuff. I wrote the afterword for the book on the plane on the way home, and it was published. Oh, wow. So
very cool.
Within 24 hours, and I'll send you a copy of the afterword that I wrote, but within 24 hours that I'm at that hotel, I'm seeing this spiritual stuff and ghosts and stuff in there and spirits, and then I meet this woman, and there's a book. It's just, you can't make this stuff up.
No, and that's just how it works. It starts with a simple becoming awareness, like you did of the smoke, the cigar smoke.
Right.
And it shifts you, and you start to follow that, and it opens you up into these frequencies that come in, and all of a sudden your life's changed. You're on a different path with what you're doing, things that you had no intention of doing. They just arrive. It makes you available. And it's incredible. And it's the same as connecting with your guides. You follow the thought, and if you do that, things will start to manifest out in the physical. It's incredible.
Which makes life so fun and such an adventure, which is what our spirit's here to
that's what we're here for
anyways. Exactly.
That's right. Yeah, we just have to realize that it's all really the same process. It's just what perspective do we see it from? Do we see it from the physical human, or do we see it from our multidimensional selves and choose to live as our quantum soul and watch it manifest? And that's where it becomes fun.
Well, and I think it's an integration of both. I think that it's our spirit attached to our body having a human experience. So we want to be able to, and it's all holographic as I perceive it.
Right.
And we want to have the human experience and be able to use spirit to not only access universal intelligence, but also to discern what's a rational fear versus an irrational fear. And 99.9% of fear is irrational. It's stuff we're making up in our heads. We're on that frequency that we're pulling in thoughts, and we're getting all stressed out and worried over things that are never going to happen because we're making them up.
Yeah, it's like you said. I mean, great point. We want to ground this. We want to integrate these energies into our physical being and let them manifest out into the physical and experience it from this perspective. And that is why we're here.
And when we're done creating in the human realm, then we go back to non-physical, and then we dream up some other stuff we want to explore, and then we come back and do another life.
Do it again. There you go, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not a whole lot of fun when you're not aware of what's happening because we're run by the mind. And we see a lot of things externally as fearful situations that create anxiety and that kind of thing. And like you said, when we could discern that and realize that we've got programs running, things we've been taught that are making us feel this way, we could just create that space and let our divine energy flow through. And that's what we're here to do.
I agree.
You're in the book. I know a lot of the situations you were in, the 12 phases of death. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. They seem to be fairly consistent with the way you perceive them with the situations. I know you talked about the maternal, the feminine being stronger than the masculine in most cases. Have you had situations where that didn't necessarily go that route? Things that surprised you, maybe things that looked a little bit different?
I have not. It's always that when we're dying, I call it the 12 phases of transition. When someone's dying, we go through 12 phases of transition into non-physical. And again, most of us have heard at least the concept, or we're familiar with the concept of time doesn't exist in the spirit world. It's a human concoction. It's a human invention. And so when somebody dies instantly, like in the case of a homicide or a suicide, or you'll hear, well, he died in a car crash. He died instantly in a car crash.
Sure.
And they're still going through the 12 phases of transition. It just maybe happens in a different time, space, reality than what we can try and grasp with our human minds based on our frame of reference. But the female presence, the mother presence, it's always on the maternal line, Mark, is always the one that's running the show from the spirit world to help the transition, which I find fascinating as a mother. And it's, if the mother is still alive, for instance, if I was dying, my mother's deceased, so it would be my mother there. If my mother was still alive, it would be her mother, my maternal grandmother. If she was still alive, it would be my maternal grandmother's mother. Always on the maternal line. And that spirit is the one that gives life to the person in the human form. They're the portal, and they're helping orchestrate transition back to non-physical. So they're giving life again into non-physical, if you will, is how I see it. But it's a riot because they call in angels, they call in other deceased loved ones, even the spirits of deceased pets are there when someone is going through the 12 phases of transition. And each phase has a different configuration of the spirits that are there and what's happening. So I can scan somebody anywhere in the world, and real time I can see what phase of transition they're in. I can communicate with them telepathically, the person who's dying, even if they're not able to talk to their family, and describe the loved ones' spirits that are in the room. And it gives so much comfort to the family to know this is going on. Plus, from a logistical standpoint and a practical standpoint, if family members want to come see the person before they pass, oftentimes that involves getting on a plane, taking time off work, or traveling long distances, and it ends up being very convenient from a logistical standpoint to get people back in town to see Grandma before she passes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I lost my dad recently. Actually, both my parents within the last few years. But my dad passed in January of this year, and I was able to. He had a brain tumor 3 years ago and had the effects of the radiation that had taken most of his cognitive abilities. But over the past couple of years, I was able to work with him and go through his fear and his anger and that type of thing and get him ready to transition. And the day he passed, was very interesting to me because I was there with him up until about 2 hours before he passed. And I was seeing his father there with him. Mm-hmm. His dad came with him at that time. My dad would tell me, he says, I'm seeing a door. For weeks before that, he would tell me he was seeing a door. He says, I'm seeing a door, and there's a man in front of the door. And I said, okay. Of course, I knew what was happening, and I was just trying to guide him and help him get comfortable and release his fears so that he could transition. Mm-hmm. But the day he died, my grandfather came, who I had never met. He passed away before I was born, and he was there with him until I left, and my dad died 2 hours later. I had felt my grandmother and others there as well. It seemed like his father was very prominent in that process, which was fascinating to me because he had trauma. My dad had trauma when his father died. My uncle had told me that it was a very difficult period in my dad's life. So to me, that made sense that he would come to help him release that. And it was just very interesting to me. It was a very strong presence.
How wonderful. There's a process that I talk about in the book too, and it's called the walk to heaven. Mm-hmm. And that is, we use that a lot with people who are dying, who are very afraid to die. And sometimes it's not the people you would think. Sometimes it's people that seem to be very religious, and you think, oh, right, that's the last person that would be afraid to die. Because they know they're taking the express elevator to heaven immediately. Yep. Like get in and push the express button to the top. And so this walk to heaven is a dress rehearsal of what's going to happen when their spirit separates from their body. And
I remember that from the book. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We find that it's very, very comforting to people. I had a couple of people last week, and I was working with their family, and they had an in-law who was dying. One was a mother-in-law, and one was a father-in-law in other states. Mm-hmm. And I was scanning them, and the person who was dying was telling me telepathically that they were really afraid to die. So we did the walk to heaven exercise, and in both instances they passed within a matter of, I think it was a matter of a few hours once that happened, because they get on the other side of what some people call the veil. I say they get past the pearly gates that look like a plasma screen, a bright yellow whitish light plasma screen to me. I didn't see any gates. I didn't see St. Peter sitting out in the front, with a checklist. But once they get on the other side, they see that all their deceased loved ones are there waiting for them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them want to stay. And I say, we got to go back. And so go back and reattach their spirit to their body. And then a lot of times they pass because it relieves the fear. And that's how this book came about, Angelic Attendance. I was with my mentor, Susan, and this dead Pope showed up, Mark.
Oh, wow.
And his whole Pope outfit, the hat and the whole 9 yards. Okay. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Pope Clement. And I said, he said, I'm Clement. And I said, there was a Pope Clement? I've never heard of a Pope Clement. He said, yeah, I was number 6. And he was kind of chuckling. And he looked like a grandfatherly figure.
Oh, sure.
And I said, well, may I help you? And he said, yeah, you need to educate the world about what happens when somebody's dying, because people are so afraid. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. It's a glorious event. You need to teach people about it. By that point, I had experienced it with my own mother. I had seen it with several other people with whom I'd worked and families. And I said to him, you'll love this, I said to him, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman. People are going to think I'm nuts. And he said, yeah, whatever. Just, get on with it, because people, it's just nuts how, I'm paraphrasing, of course. So I left Susan's office, Mark, and I was in the car, and I was getting ready to drive home, and I thought, just for kicks, I'm going to Google Pope Clement VI. Well, come to find out, he was in office during the Black Plague when 2/3 of Europe died. And he was best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, okay, there you go. I can't make this stuff up. I never heard of him. And he's there telling me I need to do this. So I did, and it took me several years to have enough golden ovary courage to release it. And I then, the things that have happened as a result include it's used in synagogues and churches of all denominations all across the country. My church gives a copy of this book to every family that comes in to plan a funeral. It's amazing to me, the places where it's gone, and it's so lovely, the emails and the comments that I get from families who say, "Oh my gosh, this
how comforting it is.
So comforting." Yeah. And even to the point where on my website, AskJulieRyan.com, there are graphics of it that you can download for free, and there's a chart you can download for free. And people will download that chart, Mark, and when they have a loved one who's dying and the family's gathering, they'll just pass the chart around to all the family members. And I've had many families tell me the sense of comfort and peace that chart brings when people know, okay, our loved ones surrounded by angels and deceased loved ones, it's just immeasurable.
Yeah, I mean, I felt them all there that day. And I know my grandfather had to come in to help to release whatever was holding my dad here and to work through some things with him at that point. But they were all there. I want to tell you this story real quick. It's so funny because talk about how events unfold. That day, he was at an assisted living facility, and the aide came in and she said, "Mark, I'm so sorry, the TV won't go off. Every time we turn the TV off, it turns back on." And I laughed. I said, "That's my mom. My mom had passed away 2 years ago. She would always have the TV on all the time." And at my dad's funeral, their old neighbor walked up to me and just out of the blue said, "Mark, I remember years ago, your mom called me up late at night and said, 'Andy, the TV will not turn off.'" This is what she's telling me at my dad's funeral. And we were having that situation while he was passing with the TV not being able to be turned off. So, this is all out there. A lot of people dismiss this stuff, but it really rocked the aide, my dad's aide at the assisted living facility. She says, "We just cannot shut this TV off. As soon as we turn it off, it comes back on," to a channel that was playing music.
Oh, sweet is that. The hit I'm getting on your granddad being there when your dad died, Mark, is the granddad who was there as much for you as he was for your dad.
Yeah, that totally resonates too. You are absolutely correct, because I had struggled when I was younger about losing my dad. Okay, this was a big fear in me. And my dad had passed that down because of the fear he had with his father. And absolutely, you are absolutely correct. That sent a shudder through my body, Julie.
Right, when I said that. Yeah, that came in very clearly.
I have known that, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you get those shudders or goosebumps, or you'll get a vibration, that's just validation from spirit that's accurate.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was there. I believe he was there way more for you than he was for your dad, because your dad could already see him.
That's right.
Your dad was already, when our loved ones are dying, it's as if they have one foot in the spirit world and one foot in our human reality, and they're able to perceive both. There's research done by a physician in Buffalo, I believe it is, and his name's Chris Kerr, Kerr, and he is the director of a huge hospice company in Buffalo. I think they have multiple facilities, and he's done research. I want to say over 2,500 patients who've been dying, and a very large percentage of them talk about seeing their deceased loved ones as they're approaching death. And sometimes they see them when they're lucid. Other times they're feeling like they're visits in dreams, but they describe dreams as being almost super HD. The colors are more vibrant. The senses are more in tune. It feels really real, and they remember details of it that normally they wouldn't remember out of a normal dream. And I tell people that's a visit. That's not a dream. That's a visit.
Right.
That happens when you experience that. And so more and more information is coming out about how, in the hospice literature, it talks about expect your loved one to say that they're seeing deceased loved ones, and maybe sometimes even religious figures. And so when I was being prodded by Pope Clement, angelic attendants, he said to me, there's lots of information out there about the afterlife and about near-death experiences, but there's not a lot of information about what's happening as we're dying. And that's really where a tremendous amount of the fear comes in. It's one thing to think, okay, am I going to fly or am I going to fry when I finally pass, with all the information that we've been inundated with religions and cultures over the years. But as much, I believe, the fear is, oh my gosh, what's going to happen as I'm dying, as I'm going through the dying process?
Yeah, and I've known that experience walking my dad through that process was actually walking me through that process as well. And I felt that. I felt like we were going hand in hand, and he was taking me through that process so I could better understand what people go through. And I was able to walk that with him. And it had happened. It was happening for months. Just a very amazing growth experience for me to be able to do that.
And I think that's the point of all of this, is there is a glorious side to the dying process. And if we can understand that and be taught or at least read about what that process is, it helps soften the grief during such a heart-wrenching time. That it helps us get through it, and it helps us when we're afraid, when a loved one's dying, we're not only afraid for them, we're afraid for ourselves, because we know eventually we're going to be in the same
facing that mortality.
Exactly.
You know, even with our knowledge, our knowing, our connection with the quantum field, we still have this programming in us that we've been taught all our lives. And there's an element of fear of finality there. And to be able to just walk through, and actually hand in hand walk somebody through that process is it's a healing journey. It's incredibly healing to be able to do that. And it was just a gift for me. He gave me the greatest gift that he ever could have in that moment.
My mother did with me too, and I talk about it in the book.
I remember that, yes. And that completely just resonated with me when you were going through that process with her. Very similar type of situation. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's a lot of it's for us. You know, for those that are the living as well.
The other thing that I find so fascinating about the 12 phases of transition is I am a practicing and was raised Roman Catholic, 12 years of Catholic schools. And at the end of every Catholic funeral, there's a prayer that's said, Mark, and it's called In Paradisum. And it talks about the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. And so at my mother's funeral, and I'd heard that prayer said lots of times, because I'd been to lots of Catholic funerals over my time, and I was in my 40s when my mom died. And at her funeral, I thought, holy mackerel, this is what I saw with these different phases of transition. I hadn't formulated it to the point, because that was the first time I'd seen it. And then, and then over the years, I had seen it many more times, and it was the same transition phases. So when I was writing the book, just for kicks, again, I Googled In Paradisum to find out when did it originate. And I found that it was written originally as a Gregorian chant that originated in the 5th century. And I thought, well, perhaps people have been able to see this since the beginning of time, and it took until the 5th century till people were well educated enough that they could read and write, and somebody was inspired to write a prayer in the form of a chant at that point. And certainly back then, some of the most well-educated people, some of the most learned people were men in monasteries and in synagogues, because they were the keepers of the history, and they were the ones that were doing the manuscripts, and they were the ones who could read and write. So I find that fascinating, and I believe that people have been able to see these phases of transition since the beginning of time. And as we've gotten more well-educated, that we have tamped down our intuitive abilities, and we're looking for scientific proof for things.
Right. Yeah, we get more focused here on the physical, and the education and things gets more sophisticated, and it pulls our energy away from that into I say the mind.
Right.
We're more of a thinking body instead of more of a knowing and intuitive body. And we need to be shifting back to the intuition and start living from that space.
Well, another fun thing that I want to share with you right before we got started, I'm sitting in my office at my big cherry desk, and there was a feather on the floor, on my hardwood floor, right next to my desk. And I'm thinking, where the heck did this feather come from? And it's a white feather, and it was right next to my desk, and I saw it right before we started, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And it's been on my mind as we've been talking, and it's been on my mind to tell you about it. How interesting is that? People talk about, when you're talking about angels, that feathers appear seemingly out of the blue, and I've got it sitting on my desk right now. It's this little white feather. I'm thinking, okay, where did this come from?
Do you know what it is? Because I think I have a little bit of an insight.
I think it's a sign, obviously.
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
Your children's book, okay? My mom wrote a children's book, and she had never published it. And when she passed, that was one of the things I took from the house. I've got the book, and one of the things I want to do eventually is I would love to publish the book, but the book is called Lovey Doveys.
Oh.
And it's about doves. And that's been on my mind since we started this chat today. And when you were talking about your children's book.
Yeah. Well, and it's the first in a series, Angel Messages for Kids. The next one that's will come out later this year. It's called Angel Messages for Dogs. And that's going to be a children's book too. And then it'll be Angel Messages for, I don't know, goldfish or firemen or whatever, nurses. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's an angel feather and a dove feather. How interesting is that? And especially considering I haven't been sitting on any down comforters or anything, so I don't know where this feather came from.
It's I mean, it could be a down feather. We don't, I don't know specifically what it is, but it represents the fact that she's, it's a validation. It's just it's a synchronicity that she's here. And she's been on my mind.
Yeah. Speaking of birds, I had a client yesterday who works for the Fish and Game Wildlife Division of the federal government. She lives in Massachusetts, and she's over all the aviaries on the whole East Coast down through Puerto Rico. And I was telling her about I told her, I said, I have 2 pet hogs. She goes, really? Are you a hunter? And I said,
you'll be mind blown. Keep going, but go ahead.
Yeah. And I said, no, but there's these 2 hawks, and they hang out on my deck, and they follow me on my walks in the morning. And just yesterday morning before I spoke with her, and this has happened several times, where I'll be on my phone and I'll be looking up somebody to call, or I'm bringing up a podcast or something to listen on my walk. They'll come, one of the hawks will come flying over me fairly low, and there's this huge shadow on the street. I feel like I'm in a Hitchcock movie. And I'll be like, okay, guys, good morning. Sorry I'm not paying attention to you. And even there have been times in my driveway when I've gone out to get the mail where I think they're married. It's a male and a female. And they'll circle me. They'll fly around in a circle. They'll circle me for a while. I'm thinking, I'm pretty big to be prey for you. I don't know that you could carry me off anywhere. Yeah. So I was telling her about that, and she said, that's so rare. And she said, send me a picture of them. She said, do you have pictures of them? I said, oh, yeah. I take them when they're hanging out on my deck, on the railing of my deck. And so she said, okay, I'll tell you what kind of hawks they are. I said, they're Alabama hawks, because I'm in Alabama. But yeah, do you have a hawk? Hawks are spiritual messengers. I looked up the significance.
Yes. So my mom had passed, and I hadn't talked to her for a couple days, and we didn't know she had passed. She was at home, and a hawk appeared on my deck, just staring at me through the window. And later on that day, we found my mom. But this afternoon, right before you and I got on the phone, I looked out in my backyard. I was listening to your book, and I looked out in my backyard, and on my deck was a hawk. And it stood there for about 10 to 15 minutes just looking at me.
There you go.
And then you have the feather, So and I knew with the hawk, that's mom. That's how it's been. So very interesting that you had the white feather. Mm-hmm. But I mean, do we really? This is life now, right? This happens all the time.
Right.
It's just up to us to recognize it.
Yeah, it's a feather. It doesn't matter what color it is. It's a feather. But my hawks have white feathers too.
That's interesting too. Yeah.
Sides.
Well, it could be from your hawk, but the feather though in the white, the way you described it to me, instantly brought me to my mom's book, which was on my mind when we started this chat. And right before that, I had the hawk sitting on my deck. So it's all, like we say, it's just all tied together.
Well, and I was inspired to tell you my hawk story and about talking with this woman yesterday who's a client for the first time. And she's an expert on all these birds, on the East Coast. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah. Again, the steps that it's all, you can't make this stuff up. We sound like a broken record, but it's so
a lot
much
of times it's like when I'm glad we had this experience together for the listeners to hear. Because a lot of times that's how it happens. You'll have a thought, and then an event will trigger the remembrance of that thought, and then more will unfold, more will flow out. Mm-hmm. And that's just how that's what creatorship is. That's what we're here to do, and that's the joy of being alive, to be able to experience the divine in that manner from the perspective of a physical human.
That's right. So get on publishing your mom's books.
Yeah, I know. That is definitely on my list. She had been, asking me for the last year before she died. She goes, I need an illustrator. And we were starting to work with that. And she got really sick, and it just kind of got put on hold. Mm-hmm. But I know she wants me to get that book out there, as we can tell. So.
And I can help you with all of that. I can, because I've done it. So I'll hold your hand. And,
you are a fantastic resource for that.
And we'll just streamline the process. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. And so I'll be delighted to help you in any way I can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm definitely gonna pull the book out and get that process moving. My mom was very persistent in life, and she was persistent after life. Mm-hmm. So she wants me to get things moving here, more for me, than for her. But it's just fantastic. It's just amazing to be able to communicate with them too after they've passed. Mm-hmm. My mom comes around, and I can communicate with my dad and my dog and my aunts, and it's just an amazing experience. But that's what I want people to learn, how to do.
Exactly, and I think it brings a sense of peace to those of us that have experienced that, and even people who haven't experienced it, just to read about the experiences that we've had that have been validated. Mm-hmm. And it lets us soften that fear as far as we really are eternal, we really are immortal. The body, as we know it, dies, and the spirit lives on. I'm on a board of advisors at the University of Arizona. There's a scientist there named Gary Schwartz who has done a lot of research in life continuing after bodily death, he calls it. And he calls it NMPs, non-material persons. He's like got an acronym
there you
for it. And he's done research, and it's been validated, and he's getting ready to do a multi-center study now at a bunch of universities, both here in America and abroad. And it's fascinating how his technology, what he's envisioning is, he calls his project the Soul Phone Project, and he's envisioning a phone app that will be able to use, anybody will be able to use it and tap into their deceased loved ones. Or you want to talk to Einstein, you want to talk to Mother Teresa, you want to talk to Napoleon, whomever, and we'll be able to connect with them through technology that we have on our phone that'll be available to anyone. And that's a big goal, but he really sees that coming, and I think technology will be used. I think this technology will be used by companies to help come up with new medicines, perhaps, or climate change stuff, or whatever. I can see big companies utilizing this technology for commercial reasons as well.
Sure, that's an interesting thing, because if we have an app that can do that, I think really what's happening is that we're getting the human mind focused on connecting, right? Isn't that really what it's all about? And that opens up the process to be able to connect.
I think it does, and also there are some schools of thought about the Schumann resonance. Do you know about that? The Earth's resonance, and that it comes primarily from lightning strikes. That energy stays in the core of the Earth, and there are some schools of thought. Actually, Tesla was the one that was really big on this. The wireless transmission. That is the same frequency of consciousness. So when we are in sync with the Earth, then we can connect to that consciousness level as well, which is fascinating.
The 0-point field, that's what he had referred to, tapping into that universal energy.
Right.
Where a lot of his inventions came from that quantum field.
Every invention comes from the quantum field. Every book, every movie, every song.
Well, everything does, right.
Yeah, we're channeling all that stuff.
He was just way ahead of his time with a lot of this stuff.
He was.
Being able to tap in and get things that were so ahead of the time of the collective. You know, we're tied in because of the mental body, and our minds were really tied into what we see around us. And to be able to have that kind of a connection, to be able to pull that down, something that really didn't fit in anywhere within conventional science, it just shows what's possible. You know, what's possible. And the more people that open up and be able to tap into that energy, the more of those kind of things are going to come down.
I agree. Yeah, like I said, I'm an inventor of surgical devices with a communication degree. How's that work?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're all tapping in. But I mean, this was back in the 1800s, 1900s,
early 1900s. Yeah.
Yeah, it just shows the potential of that connection and being able to tap into that. But yeah, no, everything that we have here in front of us, everything that we see around us comes from the quantum field. You know, everything. But yeah, if there's an app out there that helps people to connect, that'd be a wonderful thing. At least it gets people thinking about it and moving off in that direction.
Well, it's like a modern day Ouija board, almost, using the technology that we've got now. And I think the Ouija board was the same thing.
The same thing.
Connecting into that spirit's frequency.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are just things that direct us and put us into alignment. That's that's entrainment, what I had talked about before. No different than when I was sitting in my family room last year and I had 3 beams of light appear in front of me to get my attention and start communicating with me. Once I locked into those frequencies, I was able to communicate pretty much at will without them coming in and having to get my attention. They were multidimensional beings. I don't know if you've had any experience with multidimensional galactic beings in your work.
Describe what you mean by that. I have with beings from other planets and other solar systems. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
I have a fun story for you about that, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, they came in and they introduced me. Actually, what they did was they started working with me to get me aligned. I had always been fearful of ETs when I was young, growing, like movies, Close Encounters, these kind of movies. Loved science fiction, fascinated with these movies, but the term alien or the sight of an alien would freak me out. When I was young, I would just avoid it at all costs. So then I have these beings in my family room communicating with me and telling me who they are. Then I've got to start working through my fear to be able to open up more, to be available to their frequencies. So they worked with me and communicated with me to get me to release some of this. I remember one time I got a funny story where I was so sure I was past this fear, and they popped what sounded like a circuit breaker popping in my kitchen, and the lights went out, and I jumped. they were showing me that I still had fear.
Mm-hmm.
And as I opened up to them and entrained and got this energy moving within me, I received my Pleiadian guide. I had a Pleiadian guide come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been communicating with her ever since.
Wonderful.
And that's just one example. I've had others as well.
Yeah.
I've been on, you call it by location, been on craft several times, different size craft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with different species. I really don't like to label them because to me that's a limiting type of thing, but I've been aligned with a lot of these energies.
Well, I have people oftentimes that will want to know their spirit guide's name, and there have been many times where it's some language that, as far as I know, doesn't exist on Earth, or if it did, it's a dead language. But there have been many times where it's been a language that's been from a different galaxy. It sounds very Star Trek-y, but that's what I get. And so I'll say, can you give me an American English, or if I'm talking to somebody in Australia, can you give me an English name, like a nickname we can call you? And the names are hilarious, Mark, that they come up with, like Bud or Sam or Alice or whatever.
And they would say to me, I would ask what your name is, and they would say, well, just call me this.
Yeah.
Because we can't really translate because we're operating through our mind. We can't really translate these languages, but it's very clear. Call me this, so I know that's not their name, and that's what they would say to me.
Yeah. I had a gentleman call into my show. My weekly show is a question and answer show, and asked Julie Ryan, and this is episode 31, so this was a while ago. I just taped 204 last night.
Oh wow!
And his name was Musa, and he said, can you do a past life thing and see if I was an engineer in a past life? And I said, sure. And so I did, and I saw this scene that looked like the set of a Star Wars movie with the tall towers, and the vehicles that were flying kind of looked like Jetson vehicles, or Star Wars kind of stuff. And I said to him, oh my gosh, I said, this must be a future life because I'm seeing it. It's very futuristic, and it looks like a movie set of a Star Wars movie. And then I think it was 1932 or something. And it was on a different planet in a different galaxy. And he was in charge of the electrical grid, which powered not only the vehicles, but also all the power in this city or civilization or whatever I was seeing. And so I said to him, Mark, so what kind of engineer are you? And he said, I'm an electrical engineer. I said, well, of course you are. So that was a fun past life thing, and that really blew his mind with that. Yeah.
The night I found my mom, my wife and I found my mom in her house. There was actually a small craft over her house when I was driving up to it.
Oh my gosh!
And as I turned the corner, because I was driving down the road behind the house, and I was able to see it over the house. And as I continued about a quarter mile, turned into the subdivision, then turned down her street and approached the house, it was gone. But it was there, and it was really interesting because my mom had moved herself somehow into a meditative position on the floor where there was a portal where I had been communicating with a Pleiadian and my two aunts and my niece in my mom's bedroom about 2 months prior to that. My mom we found her in that spot in a meditative position.
Wow.
Just incredible, and things like that are just, it's like, wow, mind-blowing. Because 2 months prior, I was in her bedroom. She was sitting on her bed, and I was communicating with my cousin, my two aunts. Pleiadian guide was there and relaying messages to my mom.
That ship that you saw above your mom's house when you turned down her street, do you believe you saw it with your eyes, or you saw it with your intuition?
That one was with my eyes.
Did your wife see it?
My wife did not, because I had turned the way that it was too high because she was in the passenger seat and it was off the driver's side, and she looked and could not see it because of the angle. But I've seen ships before intuitively. I see all the time. This was a solid craft with lights. I saw it had lights around the center of it, and then there were 4 lights below it, and it flew off. And it was really fascinating to me, too, because my mom the coroner came, she had passed away 2 days before that.
Oh, goodness.
And she was sitting in that spot, and her poodle was locked in the bedroom with her with no food or water, and the poodle did not even go to the bathroom. There was nothing found in the bedroom for 2 days.
Wow.
So it was just a really strange experience. But my mom being in that position was just really struck me because she didn't know that there was a portal there that I was communicating where they were standing when I was communicating with them. And she was in that exact position.
A fun aside about E.T. A friend of mine is a retired costume designer from the movie business.
Okay.
And when I met him a few years ago, I said, well, would I know any movies that she'd ever worked on? He said, well, yeah, probably. And he was kind of chuckling, and he's very humble. And I said, well, okay, like which ones? And he said, well, did you ever see E.T.? And I'm like, E.T.? Are you kidding me? You dressed E.T. like in that outfit that Drew Barrymore as a kid? He said, oh, yeah, the beads, the hat, the whole 9 yards. I said, wow. You put the blanket over E.T. in the bicycle? And he said, yeah. And then he showed me pictures from being on the movie set and being in the wardrobe category, the wardrobe trucks and all that kind of stuff. And it was so fun that he had all these stories about E.T. and the puppet that they used to do that. So just wanted to mention that to you since you were afraid of E.T. I know the guy who dressed E.T. literally. That
was one of the movies, that I was just terrified from. When Elliot was putting out the little, what was it, the peanut butter M&Ms or the Skid? I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And E.T. was like, that freaked me out. But the sight of these little like gray beings would just terrify me, and I had to work through that fear to be able to really open up to be working with these ETs. We call them ETs. And I've got other experiences. So many. I've seen spherical craft dart in and out of clouds, and of course there's always the clouds as well. You're seeing the clouds that don't look quite right. That happens all the time on a daily basis.
And are you sensing or experiencing that there's any malicious intent from any of these crafts? Like there are some people, we could call them conspiracy theorists, that term used loosely, but are you sensing that there is any malicious intent from them or anything along those lines? Yeah.
No. And here's the thing, people say there's evil ETs and there's, evil. I don't know if you've come across any spirits that you consider evil or demonic or anything like that. But working with my guide, I have learned that these are energies that are stored within us that are being reflected out so that we can heal from them. I had an experience of sleep paralysis. Right after I awakened, I started having these sleep paralysis episodes. And one night I woke up at 3 a.m. and I had 3 tall beings that were black with red eyes standing next to my bed staring at me. I saw them here, and one of them, the one in the middle, kind of reached out to me. And, of course, I got freaked out. And, they went away. But when I was talking to my guide, he said that, Mark, they're us. They're your fears coming up so that we could release this, so that you could expand and grow. And once I realized that, they were gone. They vanished.
I have not had any. I don't believe in evil anything. I believe that it's been used to control the masses throughout humanity. And I believe the same as you. In the spirit world, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. It's just an experience. And there are certainly different levels of vibration and frequencies. I'm sitting at my desk, which feels very solid and heavy, but I know it's just energy vibrating more slowly than the energy we're using to communicate with this conversation. And that's what it is. But that, again, is a really big paradigm shift for a lot of people, certainly because of how we've been raised in our society.
It's conditioning.
And we need to have good and bad in our society so that we know what we want to create out from, something we don't want, but we create out from that.
I mean, how do you know what you want unless you know what you don't want, right?
Exactly.
It's that polarity thing. But these energies, because, again, that type of thing I was always fearful of. And my guide said to me, he said, these are energies coming up from you that are reflecting out to be healed. And from that point on, I knew that there were no evil spirits. I just knew that, and I had healed that and moved on from it. And it was the same thing with the ETs. Just because of the conditioning, they came to me very gingerly. Even my guide came to me very gingerly through that guided meditation for the Akashic Records. He was communicating with me inside the meditation before he came out of the meditation, and had to work with me to get over the fear, because I've just had this fear of, evil spirits and that kind of thing, and like evil, nefarious ETs. And when you go online and you read about this stuff, that's what people talk about. There's these evil ETs, and they're demonic, and this and that kind of thing. And I now know no different. I've realized it's all just vibration. A fascinating thing, though, that you just touched upon, Julie, my dad, before he passed, the last 6 months before he passed, he would tell me, I'm dead. He would say, I'm not here, I'm dead. I'm like, Dad, you're here, you're sitting in front of me, I'm dead. But as he got closer within the last 2 weeks before he passed, when he would say that, I would say, do you still think you're dead? He would say, no. And I said, well, how do you know? He said, he would point to the table, he would point to the desk, and he would say, when this is clear, I'll know I'm dead. I mean, it was just fascinating stuff that he was telling me before he died about the matter and the vibration and the frequency of things.
Interesting. Was he an engineer?
He was he was a biology teacher.
Oh.
And then in the late 70s, early 80s, he bought a pizza restaurant with my uncle. So we had that for about 6 or 7 years. And then he went into sales. So he worked for advertising, yellow book sales, yellow pages, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But he had a very scientific mind. But he was, he was also working with me and giving me messages about how none of this exists. And remember, he had brain damage from a tumor, from radiation, and he would tell me all the time, none of this is real. None of this exists. And it was just him tapping into some of this consciousness. At least the way I saw it, that's how I felt.
It's all an illusion, and we create it in our minds with the thoughts that we bring in.
Yeah, that goes to say with gravity, the information I got about gravity, very interesting story too. I don't know if you have time, if you want to hear it real quick. But
sure.
I was at my office, and I was having conversations with my guide. My guide came to me, and we were talking about gravity. And I was asking him really the nuances about it. And I knew that gravity was really created by awareness, by consciousness. Like you say, the more focus and intent we could put into something, the more dense, more real it becomes. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I felt like I had like a 500-pound boulder sitting on my chest, because I asked the question, can gravity exist without mass, without matter, physical matter, like a planet? And I felt like I had this 500-pound boulder on my chest of nothing, just sinking me into the chest. I couldn't move. And very fascinating experience.
So that was your answer? Yes, it does.
It does, yeah. And I've later come to realize, and I did research on this after I realized it, that they're realizing now that actual consciousness can create gravity, can create a gravitational field. So the stronger the awareness and the stronger the consciousness, the stronger the gravity is going to be. So we've got anchors that anchor the planet. We've got consciousness anchors that are generating a lot of the matter. And then, of course, you have the collective that plays into it.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's been a lot of wild stuff. But, yeah, it's so fascinating, too, when I speak with people, and such as yourself, when we go into the multidimensional realm and the ETs and things like that, how others have had those experiences as well.
Well, and that's what I find, and you may as well, Mark. I find that people, every once in a while, not very often, but every once in a while, people will say to me, well, I don't know that I believe this stuff. I'm a skeptic. And I'll say, that's appropriate. I'm a skeptic as well. And they'll say, well, you have to prove this to me. I'll say, no, really, I don't. If this is something you're interested in, that's fine. If it's not, that's fine too. I don't care. Whatever floats your boat. Doesn't matter to me. And then I'll say, let's talk about something else. What do you think about the weather or whatever? And then they'll always want to circle back, because people are fascinated with this. I call it woo-woo stuff, with this spiritual stuff. And when they come off and they say, well, I don't believe this. And every once in a while I'll have somebody say that, and they'll be very much of a Bible thumper kind of a person. And I'll say, well, do you pray? And they'll say, yes, I do. I pray every day. I pray multiple times throughout the day. And I'll say, well, to whom are you praying? I'll say, God or whomever. And I'll say, well, so can you see God? Is God sitting in your living room in physical form when you're talking with him? They'll say, well, of course not. It's God. And I'll say, well, so God is in spirit form? And I'll say, yeah. And I'll say, oh, so you're talking to spirits, but you're giving me grief about this?
Right.
And I'll say, well, I never thought of it that way.
They don't make the connection, right, until you point it out.
Yeah.
It's like planting seeds almost, right? Because they know, everybody has this innate ability, and they know the truth. They know the reality of it. But sometimes we just have to kind of plant that seed, and then they'll go off and do whatever they're doing, and then it just starts to germinate within them, and then they'll come back and say, tell me a little more about that.
Right. And every civilization and every religion talks about angels or ancestors or spirits or saints or whatever, and it's all there. We're hardwired for it, but as I mentioned before, as we've become more well-educated, I think we've become more, prove to me right now that this is happening. Forget
everybody
the
wants
double-blind
evidence.
studies. Yeah, absolutely. And we get evidence, but then a lot of times we discount it.
But the evidence is there, right? I mean,
exactly.
If you look at the pyramids of Egypt, okay, and how now they're saying that they're thousands of years older than originally thought. How are these pyramids built? The language, the hieroglyphics, and the imagery that's stamped into these pyramids, that kind of thing. There's evidence all around the planet, but everybody wants to kind of discount that, not look at it for whatever reason. I don't know. It doesn't fit within the education system we have today. Whatever it is.
And that's fine. I think it's all up to us, and it's all of our prerogative to decide how we want to live our life. And I use the analogy of being at a buffet, that when I'm at the salad portion of the buffet, they have jalapeno peppers. Well, I don't like jalapeno peppers. They burn my mouth. My husband loves them. He eats them like pickles. And just because I don't want them doesn't mean that I don't want him to have access to them. So I think when we think along those lines, that it's a buffet. You pick and choose what you want, what feels good to you, what you're interested in. And at the same time, there's something else on that buffet that you don't want to eat, but somebody else is going to want to eat it. So let them eat it, and let them choose what it is that they want to eat or believe or think or explore. It's all perfect.
Absolutely. It's out there. And again, you just choose to look at it, and you could decide for yourself. And a lot of people will look at this stuff, and it'll just resonate. It'll strike something within them. It'll just activate something, and they'll know it's the truth. Or maybe they'll even get memories of how these things were created or built. And it's all out there. But, there's other people that just don't want to believe that until there's some sort of other documented proof, whatever, because the history books may say something different, and that's what they choose to listen to or buy into. But yeah, it's just evidence all around of this kind of stuff, and all we have to do is just turn our focus to it, and allow it to flow through us.
I agree.
Yeah. So I wanted you to tell people how they could find you. I know you mentioned your website and where they can purchase your book, or both books, actually.
AskJulieRyan.com is where you can find anything you need that has to do with my work. And my books are available wherever you buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, places like
beautiful.
that, and Apple Books. And the Angelic Attendance is available in audiobook and paperback, and also digital for Kindle. And of course, the children's book is not audio because it would take you 2 minutes to listen to the children's book. But it's more about the pictures. But it's available in paperback and also digital. And it's just such a delight to get to have this in-depth conversation with you, my CPA friend. I love this. A businesswoman and a CPA exploring woo-woo.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely was my pleasure, and I'm so happy we got to connect with this and move into some areas that honestly I didn't think we were going to move into. So that's always a joy to be able to just allow that to flow and kind of see where it goes.
I agree. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome, Julie. Thank you so much.